off to Wano, or at least that's where this video will be taking place. Okay, Kinemon video number 4. There's gonna be 5 of them. Kinemon video number 4. This is going to cover when he returns to Wano with, the Straw Hat group and the Heart Pirates that are with him, and then all the way up until the raid, basically. So when they're getting to the raid. Because there's enough that happens during the raid on Onigashima, fighting Kanjuro, fighting Kaido, fighting Orochi again, fighting Kaido again. And then afterwards, it's just like, that's just going to be its own video. Some of the other Scabbards, I might be able to concise it down a little bit more. But for pretty much most of the Scabbards, the raid on Onigashima is going to be like, and then what happens after is going to be like an episode in like its own video for each of the individual Scabbards. Because there's a lot that happens there. And it's a really freaking long mini arc basically in the story. Okay. So, where we left off was Kinemon along with Usopp, Frankie, Robin, and Zoro along with the Heart Pirates. We're going to return to Wano, so that way they could start with scouting out Wano, getting those 4 members of the Straw Hats a little bit more familiarized with Wano, while Luffy, Nami, Chopper, and Brook were off getting Sanji from Totland, and while Nekomamushi is off trying to get Marco to show up to be able to help them in Wano. And then picking up Izo on the way, although that's not something that they know about at that point in time. Izo's also going to be a fun one to talk about. And I don't know if I've addressed this yet in the videos. I'm going to do these kind of in the order that they become Scabbards, minus Inuarashi and Nekomamushi, because I've already done videos about them when I talked about Zou. But so then it will be Denjiro, then Izo, and Kiku. I've already talked about Kanjuro. And then it would be Raizo and then Kawamatsu. Because Kawamatsu joined the Scabbard group basically at the same time that Inuarashi and Nekomamushi do, because they all do it at the same time. Because they're all found by Oden at the same time. But I've already talked about Inu and Neko, so I don't need to talk about them again, except like a little bit here and there. But in regards to this, so Kinemon gets them to Wano, is able to help, get them to Wano. Law and the Heart Pirates are there as well. They help with getting, they all go undercover. Kinemon uses his abilities to help get them set up in this regard, get them into the proper outfits and everything else like that. I would assume since they're given more time, they've probably moved on from using Kinemon's powers to give them the outfits that they're in, geisha dress for Robin and, stuff like that. That they've actually bought an actual clothes for them to wear and then, base them off of like what Kinemon had them look like type of a thing. I would just assume that that's what happened, because it's like if they've been running around in those clothes for like 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how long they're there, that's a good chunk of time. And take your pick. But they get to Wano, and Kinemon kind of goes and basically sets up his, base, would be the best way to put it, the little rebel base inside of the ruins of Oden Castle, up on the top of, up over where like the Paradise Farms are and everything. And that had been where, Oden Castle had stood, Curry Castle had stood when Oden had been the daimyo, and up until when it was, set aflame by Kaido and everything, and then shortly later in this video, destroyed by Kaido. And Kinemon works with the Straw Hats that he brought with them and the Heart Pirates to start trying to gather information. He also explains to them, they make up the little, card things that are, the 2 cranes and everything that are supposed to be the message to the people in Wano about what's going to happen, about the idea of, getting together and, fighting against Orochi, having a rebellion in that regard and everything, and, finding the people who have like the little crescent moon tattoos on their ankles and everything. And Kinemon is kind of the one in charge of that at the moment. His other intention is to try to find Denjiro along with Ashura Doji, so that way they can find the rest of the Scabbards that would be in Wano. Now, given the fact that how surprised and happy Kiku is when she sees him again, I would assume that he has not made contact with her since they left Wano the first time. So there's that. Also, he doesn't go and try to find Suru because, in his opinion, he's surprised that she hasn't gotten married yet, so he doesn't know anything about that. I am going to put a video about Suru in this somewhere because she is freaking awesome and I love her. And I don't care if she's not royalty. I'm going to talk about her because she definitely acts as a leader in her community. That might just be like, I'll do Suru and then Kinemon and then move on to the rest of the Scabbards. But what ends up happening is, of course, Kinemon just basically stays in the castle. And then we have it when Luffy and his group finally arrive. And they are all able to make their way to the castle. And they bring Kiku with them. And because Zoro and Law show up and they're able to help with getting them to the castle. And of course, this is where we have it that Kinemon has unfortunately been eating a bunch of the poison stuff, drinking the poison water and everything else like that. So he's been having a lot of very, very, very bad indigestion, to put it politely, over the past several weeks. Which is just funny because then when Luffy gets there and he sees all of the graves for all of the Scabbards that are really old. Well, they're 20 years old, but that's a good chunk of time for a grave. And he's looking at them, and then Kinemon comes wandering out. Luffy's like, "Oh no, it's a ghost!" Which is just funny. But somewhere in this time frame when they first got there, Kinemon would have sat down Usopp, Robin, Frankie, and Zoro, and he told them about the history of what happened, Law and the others, and told them about what happened in Wano 20 years ago, and told them about how they had traveled 20 years into the future because of Toki. And so he would have done that very shortly after they got to Wano, before they set out to go and start infiltrating. Robin as a geisha, Frankie as, a carpenter, Usopp as a toad oil salesman, and then Zoro basically as a Ronin. And things were going fine. Gathering information, everything else like that, trying to spread the word as best they could. And what ends up happening is, of course, that's when, Luffy's group returns, and they end up bringing Kiku with them on Komichio, is their ride up to the castle. And Kiku is just very happy to see Kinemon. He's happy to see her too. And she just jumps on him and hugs him and everything. And then Sanji gets jealous of Kinemon and makes some type of a comment about it. And then both Kinemon and Kiku are just yeah, no. Kinemon's no, I'm married. That is a no. He views Kiku as a little sister, is the way that he treats her. He's very happy to see her, but he sees her more as a little sister, the same way that pretty much the rest of the Scabbards all basically saw Kiku as a little sister. And he's no, I'm married. And she, and that's when Kiku says, "Oh yes, I've found Suru. I've been working with her and everything, and she is still, very loyal to the Kozuki cause and everything, and and she helped, she's kind of the reason how I, found Luffy and everything." So he, Kiku, kind of updates Kinemon a little bit, and he's happy about that. This is also when he ends up giving the Straw Hats their new and Carrot, their new Wano outfits and everything, using his powers. And then he sits them down, and then he explains to them that they're actually from 20 years in the past, and that him, Momo, Raizo, Kanjuro, and Kiku have all been sent to the future by Toki, and he explains this to them. We don't get the full explanation at that point in time. We just get the basic thing of yeah, no, that was 20 years ago that everything happened. That's why those grave markers are out there. because everybody thinks we're dead, which is good. So that'll allow us more time to find Kawamatsu and Denjiro and Ashura Doji while we, still are in hiding. Which, credit to Kinemon, they find them. So he's not wrong. But of course, things don't stay that way quite so well for, the whole time. But what ends up happening is, of course, Kaido arrives in the Kuri region because he gets called in by Jack and Hawkins of all the stuff that's going on there. And Kaido shows up. Luffy goes to try to fight him. Law goes to try to fight Luffy. And what basically ends up happening is, of course, Kaido then, does Boro Breath at the castle to destroy it, which allows... Well, there's several things that happen here. First of all, this is when it is revealed to Shinobu, and I think Kiku is there as well, sees Momonosuke, who has now been reunited with them as well, sees Momonosuke turn into his dragon form for the first time. So they now know about that, which of course would be quite bewildering to them, given the fact that Shinobu has been living in Wano. Shinobu is also going to be part of the list of the Scabbards. And I'll talk about her as well. Shinobu has been living in Wano, so she's very familiar with what Kaido looks like. Kiku is not as familiar, but she still remembers what Kaido looks like. And so they're kind of befuddled by Momo being a dragon. But of course, that's when, Kaido attacks. Boro breaths the castle to just destroy whatever remains of the ruins. And, Shinobu is able to use her power just in time to allow them to all sink into the ground and save the Straw Hats and the Heart Pirates and such that are there. So they're fine. And then, basically, Luffy gets captured and Law ends up, having to go back into hiding, whatever. They were already exposed. So, Luffy fights Kaido, gets knocked out, doesn't do a lot of damage to Kaido, gets taken away. Kinemon then puts on, the little, burglar disguise thing that I still don't understand. It's that's not covering enough of your features to frickin' hide who you are, but whatever. It's the same reason why I have issue with, okay, I can understand people not recognizing Batman because he has, the mask that covers, a good chunk of his face. But then there's other superheroes that I'm just your mask does not cover your face well. And you don't have another reason as to why people won't, recognize you type of a thing. But whatever. Superman, Clark Kent, glasses, take your pick. But what ends up happening is Kinemon does go down to Okabore town in his disguise, and he, ends up seeing Tsuru and everything, so, from afar. And then he notices Shutamaru. And he, of course, recognizes that as Ashura Doji. So he's like, okay, that gives me an idea of, what I need to do next. So Kinemon then kind of makes the dumb decision of going to, well, it's not dumb yet. He goes to Mount Tatama, the Top Knot Hill, and he goes and he tries to fight Ashura Doji. He interrupts a fight between Ashura Doji and Inuarashi because Inuarashi has shown up there to try to convince Ashura Doji to join them. Kinemon went there for the same reason. He goes and tries to make them stop fighting. They're like, you swore your loyalty to Odin and everything and to his family, so why aren't you helping us? And Ashura, and I'll go into this more obviously when I talk about Ashura, but he has his own reasons at the moment as to why he is kind of against wanting to be part of this rebellion because of what happened 10 years ago, which we'll get to. And what ends up happening from there is Kinemon is still very determined to get Ashura to be their ally. So, basically what ends up happening is, somewhere in this time frame, they kind of move from, since the castle's gone, they can't use it as their base. They kind of set up headquarters in in an abandoned village in Curry. So it's not Amagasa village, it's just one of the other villages that's there, and because there's a lot of those, because Kaido and Orochi. And they set up there, and he's trying to find out if Frankie got the mansion's blueprints, which he didn't because reasons, and Ashura has them anyway, so it's not like Frankie's gonna find them and everything. So it's just like, okay, well, we need to get other information. So other stuff is going on with the Straw Hats in the Flower Capital and everything else like that, and Luffy and Udon and a bunch of other stuff is going on at that same time frame. And eventually, somehow the Beast Pirates found out about Kinemon's secret with, those with the tattoo. We, of course, find out later on that this is Kanjuro, gave the information to Orochi, and told him about that the symbol means that these people are associated with, the Kozuki family. Which, of course, we don't know yet at this point in time when we're reading through the manga, unless you're reading through it a second time or third time or whatever. And what ends up happening is, so a bunch of their allies start getting arrested. And one of the ones that is arrested is, of course, Yasuie, or Tonoyasu, as he is called at that point in time. Talked a whole bunch about him already. And what ends up happening is, he is going to be executed. Yasuie is going to be executed, which of course leads to Kinemon and Inuarashi and Ashura all in Bakura Town as they are watching what is going on. As they're watching the execution. And, they're just torn up about this. We also know that, Raizo is here at this point in time, and he's watching as well. Well, Raizo's not there. Raizo's at Udon at that point in time. And, of course, Kawamatsu is watching from inside the cell. And, Kiku is currently on their way to Udon at that point in time because they haven't arrived at that point in time yet. So she's not exactly aware of what's going on with Yasuie, but I'm sure she was torn up about it when she found out. And then, of course, they eventually tell, Inu's there. So eventually, Neku and Mushi will fight out. But, they're all the Scabbards that are able to are watching what's going on as Yasuie is executed, and they are just so torn up and mourning his death. And Kanjuro's there too, blah 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 blah, and they're just so torn up about this because they very much admired Yasuie. He was a friend of Odin's. He's the last daimyo from the reign of the Kozukis and everything. So they're all just very torn up about this. And then Ashura explains to Inuarashi and Kinemon about what the smile fruits are. And we're kind of getting this in time when, in the manga, as we're reading, and in the anime, it's being looped in with, as Hiyori is explaining it to Zoro as to, what the smile fruits actually are. And they're just, oh, God. Oh, God. They're just so upset about that. They're just even more upset about this for everything that has been going on in the country for the last 20 years that they were unable to prevent. And this leads into there ends up being a moment because Kinemon and Inuarashi had kind of come up with the idea to frame the Mount Atama bandits as the ones who stole food from Hold'em and his group in Bakura Town, whichever one it was, that they stole their food, which of course then made Hold'em go and attack the Mount Atama bandits, which of course resulted in not good things because that's not good. And of course then Kinemon goes to talk to Ashura again, and Ashura is very rightfully angry about this. And, he's knocked Kinemon to the ground, and Kinemon and Inu are apologizing about this. And there's they're just trying to get, Ashura to join them. And, this is after they've watched Yasuie be executed. This is after, Ashura is very rightfully angry about this. And, Kinemon and Inu are apologizing about this. And they're just trying to get, Ashura to join them. And, this is after they've watched Yasuie be executed. This is after, Yasuie be executed. This is after I know Mount Atama gets burned down. I don't remember if it's during this time frame or if it's shortly after, but I know Mount Atama gets set on fire at some point. And that'll probably come more in when I do the Ashura video, but I don't remember exactly when that is. Snoring puppy in the background. And what ends up happening is, Ashura takes Kinemon and Inarashi, and he takes them to show them this mass grave site that they have. And then Ashura explains to them what happened 10 years ago. The fact that they had that he had all of these comrades that had been very loyal to the Kozuki family and everything, and into Odin and everything in the past. And over the past 10 years, and a bit before then, with everything with Orochi, they'd been watching Wano suffer. They'd been watching possibly family die, friends die, watching other people who they cared about die, or be tortured or whatever at the hands of Orochi and Kaido and their subordinates and everything. And just watching their country be destroyed. And Ashura is explaining this to Kinemon and Inarashi. And what ends up happening is, of course, he explains to them that, 10 years ago, they had decided that they were through with waiting. That they couldn't wait for Toki's prophecy because by then they would be too old to be able to fight. And now bear in mind, as I mentioned earlier in this, Kinemon is physically, I think 36 years old, I think is what it was. Is what he's chronologically supposed to be. Yeah, he's physically 36 years old, chronologically 56 years old. And I think that Kinemon is actually, he's one of the oldest of the Scabbards in regards to, chronologically, he's one of the oldest of the Scabbards. And I think Denjiro is just a little bit younger than him. But then if you want to, because it's he was older than, Kiku and Izo when they found them and everything, and he's older than Kinemon and Raizo, I believe. But I think he is older than Inu and Neko and Kawamatsu and stuff. So I think Kinemon is the eldest of them, but given the fact that he skipped ahead 20 years, now Inu, Neko, Ashura, Kawamatsu, and Izo are all older than Kinemon. So it's for you, the death of Odin is a lot more fresh than for them. But from Ashura's perspective, and this is something that Kinemon is learning at this point in time, that 10 years ago they had all of these comrades and they tried to go and fight Kaido. Unfortunately, they failed. They went, they did the whole, Asauchi, or not Asauchi, Tsunache thing, the whole, brave children trying to, fight for what they believe in. And it didn't work. They were no match for Kaido's forces, for the Beast Pirates. At this point, he would have had King and Queen. Well, had King and Queen already. Probably would have had a young Jack at that point in time. Would have had maybe some of the other Tobi Roppo, depending on stuff, at least in some shape or form. And, had a bunch of the others. He probably wouldn't have had the Smiles yet, because I don't think the Smiles existed yet 10 years ago. But you get the idea. And, he would have had their, Kaido's forces would have been, so they were so easy to wipe. They wiped the floor with Ashura's, comrades at that point in time. And they all died in battle. And Ashura shows these graves to Inu and Kinemon. And Kinemon is I get it now, I'm sorry. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, he does kind of apologize for thinking that Ashura had no reason to have, given up hope in Odin, given up faith in the Kozukis. And Ashura does end up joining them. He does end up becoming part of the, he's okay, we're going to do this. I will join you. but you have to understand we're also fighting for these guys who didn't live to make it to be part of this attack. And, and then, the three of them are happy again. And, Inu and Ashura kind of tease Kinemon about, like, now that they're older than him and everything. And they have 20 years more fighting experience than he does. And Kinemon's just, calling them two old geezers as they're just arguing. So it's like, again, it's like those bonds are coming back between the Scabbards, which is very nice to see. Then we get another thing that I'll go over more when I get to Ashura again, is Ashura then takes Kinemon and Inu to the abandoned port, and he shows them all of these different ships that they have, kind of saved over the years that could be used to carry the troops to Onigashima, which of course then leads into these ships are then, rebuilt and refurbished and everything, so that way they are seaworthy and everything. And, Frankie and Usopp help with that, along with the Minks and stuff like that. And some of the other ones connected with the Yakuza and everything, like, they help with getting those ships all rebuilt and everything, so that way they're good and ready and everything for, like, 2 weeks later for the Fire Festival, for when it's time for them to head out for the raid. So that's good. Kinemon is also then given the blueprints of Kaido's residence by Ashura Doji, because he's had them for years. So it's like, again, it's like this thing where it's like Ashura hadn't completely lost faith in Odin or in the Kozukis or in Toki's prophecy. It's just he's been looking at this a little bit more realistically since then, because it's like, yeah, you guys got to jump ahead to the future 20 years. We're the ones who had to stay here and, like, live through all of this and watch our country go to crap. And then come up with ideas for how to fix this. Again, I'll touch on this with Kawamatsu, and it's like him getting the weapons and everything. So it's like, it's not, and, Denjiro and everything with what he goes through. So I'll touch on it from different perspectives at that point, when I talk about each of the other Scabbards as I get to them. And more in depth when I talk about Ashura Doji when I get to him as well. And so Kinemon is very grateful to him for this, and of course they're able to communicate with Raizo and everything and find out what's been going on at Udon Prison, and saying that, okay, no, now we've got the Yakuza on our side and everything, and all of this stuff. And then eventually they, and like connecting with Kawamatsu and the Ringo region and everything. Like, yes, we've got weapons, we've got boats, we've got men, we've got supplies, and all this other stuff. So they're getting everything ready. And what ends up happening is, of course, they kind of end up moving and relocating kind of their, like, little base and everything to Amagasa Village at that point in time, because Kaido's crew doesn't have anything to do with Amagasa Village at that point in time. It's kind of destroyed. They have no interest in it. Plus, it gives places so that way, like, Luffy can train there and no one's really going to notice it. Zoro can train with Enma and everything at that point in time. And things like that, and they can prepare. And from there, it's basically just, the next 2 weeks up until the raid are spent getting everything lined up and ready. So it's, they're in communication with the Yakuza members and everything else like there. Kawamatsu and Kinemon are able to be reunited. And, a bunch of this other stuff is going on, they have weapons, they have the ships and everything, and, they're connected with the Yakuza bosses, so they're able to help make sure that everything's lining up the way that it needs to, for, how all of this is going. And, they hear that Hiyori is alive because Kawamatsu and Zoro kind of confirm this. I will point out here, and I'll point this out again later, they don't state that Hiyori was Komurasaki, because if that had been the case, then Kanjuro would have sent that letter off to Orochi right away, that Hiyori was Komurasaki this whole time. Not that I have any idea who Komurasaki is, but, like, neither do Zoro or Kawamatsu. They don't really know who Komurasaki is at that point in time either, because Zoro never interacted with her when she was Komurasaki, and Kawamatsu has been in the prison for the past however many years when she would have been making her rise to fame and everything. So neither of them know about that. So I love that. And again, I'll go over that when I talk about Hiyori later on. I kind of covered that a little bit already when I talked about Kanjuro and when I talked about Orochi, I believe. So it's, so they're like finding all of this stuff and everything, and they watch Kinemon watches as Zoro is given Enma and everything, and then we get kind of like counting down the days to this, and everybody's training and getting ready and everything during this time frame, doing what they need to do so they're prepared for this. About 3 days before, Robin informs Kinemon about like the number of enemies that they will be facing, and of course, like 2 days beforehand, Kinemon sits and he's like tallying up the numbers of weapons and warriors and all of this, and allies and all of this other stuff that they're going to have going into this battle. And he's disappointed that they can't include at that point in time the ones who were imprisoned in the Flower Capital, because they're still being held, imprisoned by Orochi and his own, egotistical whatever. So, but they're able to count the former prisoners from Udon Prison. They're able to count the Heart Pirates, the Straw Hat Pirates, the the Scabbards, the Minks, few other ones here and there. They're able to count and everything. And, so they're coming up with, like, that tally there. It's like, okay, and, so we've got weapons, we've got warriors. Okay, so this is what we've got. Along with anybody else that they've been able to find that can help with fighting. That hasn't been locked up by Orochi at this point in time. So they're planning all of that. Then the day before the raid, Kinemon speaks to Luffy before they're heading out and everything. And it's, just kind of, words of encouragement. We'll see you in a day. We'll see you at the port and everything. And part of what happens is of course, Kinemon, because of the alteration to the notes, to the pictures that Yasue had made, he is assuming that, okay, they're going to actually meet at this port, not this other port, where actually everybody ends up actually meeting, as opposed to where the Scabbards are meeting, because everybody else gets the message change except Kinemon and his group, which is great because that means that, Kanjuro can't then pass on that information to Orochi, so it like works in a roundabout way, and it also just is like Kinemon being Kinemon, which is just funny. And then the Scabbards at that point in time, which would be Kinemon, led by Kinemon, and then we have Inu, Neko is not there yet, Kawamatsu, Raizo, Ashura, and then Shinobu and Kanjuro are there, and then Momonosuke is with them as well. And they all head off to make their way to the port. And, on their way, and, we have the, Tama made them the hats and everything. And, it made them all the straw hats and everything, so that way they're good. And, for their trip. And they make their way there, and they arrive at the meeting place, and no one is there. No ships and no allies are there. And it's raining, and it's storming, and the waves are really thrashing about. And all of the Scabbards and Momo are just like, does this mean that Orochi managed to stop everybody from being able to show up? And they're like, this is horrible, this is bad, but we have to trudge on. And, Kinemon and the other Scabbards all get into the boat, the little dinghy, with, Shinobu staying on the beach, on the shore with Momonosuke to keep him safe. Hi, Boo. Yes, I will pet you. You're a very good doggo. You're the very best little puppy Boo. You always do this. You always make me pet you. Well, that's your job. I'm a pet. You're supposed to pet me. I'm a good Boo. Yes, you're the best little Boo who ever did Boo all over the world. But I'm talking about a very serious situation right now. And I had to stretch. So that's on you, Mommy. I love you. Oh. Got a puppy Boo. Here, I'll make sure I'm off to the side so you can see the dog. for however long she wants to stay there so you can see her. Pet the baby. And so what ends up happening is, the Scabbards are all in the boat, and they're all on their... Kiku... I think I missed Kiku in the lineup earlier. She's there, too. They're all in, the boat on their way. And it's Kiku who brings up the fact that it's like, but we never figured out who the traitor was. And, Kanjuro is there, and he's, or Kiku is there, and she's urging him to figure out who the mole is before they can get to, Onigashima. And, of course, that's when Kanjuro reveals himself to have been the traitor this whole time. But it was me the whole time. Ha 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 ha. And then everything just goes to heck in a handbasket. Kinemon slices off Kanjuro's head. Not actually Kanjuro's head. Is actually fake Kanjuro that real Kanjuro drew using his real abilities with his powers and showing off his real artistic abilities. We cut back to the shore where we see that Momonosuke and Shinobu are being attacked by the real Kanjuro. And Kanjuro ends up managing to kidnap Momonosuke as he is flying away toward Onigashima to bring him to Orochi to end. At this point in time, all of the Scabbards are freaking panicking at this point in time because also 3 ships from the Beast Pirates have shown up. Thankfully, the Straw Hats, the Heart Pirates, and the Kid Pirates, along with the rest of their allies, or a bunch of their allies, have now shown up. And they take out the ships very easily. The Scabbards boat is lifted up on Lost Submarine onto the Polar Tang. And so they're able to have that type of... So they're able to, point out Kanjuro's the... they're able to explain Kanjuro was the bad guy and he took Momonosuke and everything. So they're like, okay, that's not good. And then the Kiyoshiro family... Kiyoshiro family arrives. And Kiyoshiro, attacks the ship from the Beast Pirates. And this just confuses everyone. And then he takes off his ponytail muff, which I still don't understand, and reveals his true identity as Denjiro. And the way he's able to prove this, which I love, he confirms this because the only 2 people besides Kinemon that know exactly what happened with the Mountain God incident, 30 whatever years ago, 40 years ago, with Odin, are Odin and Denjiro. So he's able to confirm that. Confirm his identity. And then, of course, Denjiro reveals that, the alternate message from, from Yasue's altered message meant that that the allies, them to meet at the Habu port, and instead of this other port. So they're like, oh, yeah, sure, that's what was supposed to happen. And I love that bit. It's just Kinemon is just having to bite his tongue at that moment. And I love it. It's just Denjiro is praising him for having tricked whoever the heck they thought the mole was, which is of course not what happened at all. And we see Raizo, and I think I think Inu is in the background as well, just giving Kinemon this yeah, you did not plan any of that at all type of instance, that type of a reaction, which is hilarious, and I love it. I love that moment of levity there. Well, Momonosuke is being kidnapped in the background. Momonosuke also, shouts at them, it's just I'll be fine. Just, get to Onigashima, I'm fine. And everything. So, they also reveal that, they were able to get to where they needed to go before Orochi destroyed destroyed all the bridges and everything that connected the different regions. And Denjiro was just well, I freed all of the prisoners that were in Ratsetsu town who Orochi had in prison for stupid reasons. Valid reasons in the fact that he was right, but... it's so now now their numbers are up to 4,500 against Kaido's men. And so that's basically what happens there. And they are on their way to the Torii Gate from the Tokage port with this massive fleet. They're on their way to Onigashima. And, you know, Kinemon, you know, he's been reunited now with the rest of the Scabbards except for Izo and Neko. Well, he's been reunited with Neko, but Izo, who will show up shortly with Neko, and that will be in the next video. And all of them are just, you know, they're all headed on their way to Onigashima and all ready to go and fight Kaido. They're all prepared for this. They're all upset with the fact that that they had been misled by Kanjuro for years and years. But that they're now kind of going to try to use that to their advantage, and the fact that, like, as long as they keep it hidden that the Scabbards and that, like, the samurai and such are infiltrating Wano or infiltrating Onigashima, that that will hopefully be helpful in regards to, you know, Kanjuro trying to throw Kanjuro off his game or throw Orochi off his game or whatever for, like, their numbers as they show up. So we'll see how that goes. Well, we know how that goes, but, like, you know, I'll talk about that more in the next episode, in the next video. But that's what we have for this. I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.